Welcome to Sober.Coffee, a weekly coffee chat sharing experience, strength, and hope for anyone on the sober road to recovery. You can download Sober.Coffee weekly on all podcast platforms and check us out on Instagram at Sober.Coffee Podcast and on Twitter at Sober.Coffee Pod. To learn more about us and to help support these sessions, visit online at Sober.Coffee. Here are your hosts, two guys on their own path to recovery, Mike and Glenn. Let's join them at the coffee shop.
Good morning, Glenn.
Hey, what's up, my brother? How are you, man?
Hey, good. You know what? We've had some good sessions. Normally, you walk away and you say, was that good or not? But I'm telling you, the nuggets, as I go back and listen to these episodes, if you just take notes, like old-fashioned notes and just pull it's amazing how just conversation with somebody else in recovery will uncover knowledge for me. I'm learning and growing. I mean, it was great stuff.
I just laughed because when we started talking about this, really, what are we going to talk about?
Right.
We're going on 5 years,
right?
280 episodes or whatever it is,
right, with our bonus drops.
And every single time we connect, I learn.
Okay.
I learn, I grow, I think of things differently, I expand my thinking, and we'll probably have 1,000 episodes. Who knows?
Who knows?
I love it.
But I'm excited about this episode because we have a table for three this morning
table for threes
in our coffee shop. And so a little background is Dan G, one of my sponsees, said to me, he sent me a couple. He's like relentless. He's like, hey, you got to get Keaton Douglass on. And because she's great. And I'm like, okay, well, let me go learn about Keaton Douglass, right? And then life got busy, and then he pokes me again, and then he pokes me again. I'm like, all right, Dan. I mean, it's the sponsee telling the sponsor what to do, right?
Exactly.
Something's gone amok in my home. Anyway, I started checking Keaton out, and super excited to have you this morning because there's a couple of things that we'll talk about, I hope. Number one, you're on the front line of this opiate addiction process. And, we're, our big thing was alcohol. We're a little bit older. I'll say it. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I was a product of the 70s. As Leonard Skinner said, there are things that I've tried everything in my life. There's things that I've tried twice. I've got that right. But I grew up in a different era with controlled drugs, if that might be an oxymoron, and alcohol. I knew where they were being manufactured from. I was, as much as I was in the disaster zone, I was in a safe zone. What's going on in the world right now absolutely positively breaks my heart. It breaks my spirit. Kids are dying because they want to just get a little high, and it's absolutely terrible. I'm on the other side of a trade that was going bad, but something's got to be done. And Keaton, you are doing stuff about it. And thank you so much for joining us. We're going to do a couple sessions. We're going to try and cram a lot in because you do a lot. And I don't think we're going to solve all the world's problems, but thank you for joining us this morning. I'll kind of tap into your biography as we go along, but what's your commentary on the state of let's talk about the opiate addiction first and kids today and maybe how alcohol intertwines with that. But what's your feeling? I know you're also a big proponent of education.
Sure, of course. Thanks for having me, fellas. I'm delighted to be here with you. I am looking at those donuts in front of you. I'm remiss that I'm not in studio with you. But
healthy muffins.
We will email one to you.
But I am really seriously most grateful to have an opportunity to talk to you and to your listeners. And you've said it quite eloquently. This is a pervasive problem. I think one of the things that I'm really learning is that the opioid addiction and addiction in general, that unnatural attachment to a substance or behavior that keeps us from our relationship with our higher power, from our fellows, and even from our authentic selves, is pervasive not only here in the States, but, I have an opportunity to, we're bringing recovery to the continent of Africa right now.
Wow.
And one of the things that was shocking to me was that, 14 to 16% of the population in the 8 countries in which I'm working have the same problem as we, primarily with alcohol. So this is such a global issue, and certainly with opioids, we see it every day. Fellas, I keep a log since 2016 when I really started doing this full time. I've lost 70 people.
Holy cow.
Some of them to alcohol related issues for sure. But the majority of them were to fentanyl overdoses. Fentanyl overdoses. I just lost a young man a couple of weeks ago that I had been working with for the last several months. And it's a tragic situation. I think there's a lot of hope. And that's where I come in. I have the greatest thing I was ever called when I was in a treatment facility. I walked in. I said, "What do you think I do? What do I do here?" And they said, "Well, we're used to dope dealers, but you're our hope dealer."
Glenn bought me a shirt. It says Hope
Did
Dealer.
you?
And my family loves when I wear it. I get so
love
many.
it.
Hold on a second. What does Glenn got?
What's going on there, brother?
Hope Dealer.
You got
He's got the shirt on today.
Now that's a little crazy,
Hope
right?
dealer.
That I
That's
would say
crazy.
that's a little.
That's how
that
this
was
stuff
a
works.
little,
That's crazy.
Yeah, it does, right? But that's what we do. That's
Yeah.
that's what we're doing. We
I think
bring
that's the
light
fuel
and
to get
hope
started.
people.
It's a
I
fuel
think
to
you
get started.
got to have a little bit of hope.
So Keaton,
Yeah.
you're an author as well. You wrote a book.
Yeah.
I don't know how recently. I'm sorry, and I do want to read it. I've ordered
Yeah.
it, and I just want to read
Great.
it. It's called The Road to Hope.
Right,
So, and this talks about responding to the crisis, right?
right.
So,
That's it.
when did you publish that book?
Well, so the book was written in 2023. It was released in 2023. It was written
Okay.
in 2022, released in 2023. We've won several awards in 2024. I just want to tell you that my take on everything. I run the
iTHIRST.
iTHIRST initiative.
Right.
Right. Yeah, I'm the executive director there, and our goal is we feel very strongly that that this disease it's really kind of what I consider the tripod of wellness, right? So there are clinicians that deal with mind and body,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't think we speak enough about the spiritual component of wellness for all of us,
Right.
Regardless of whether somebody's in recovery or not. I think we're in recovery. Every one of us is in recovery from something,
Right, trauma, whatever the case, right?
Deep resentments,
Yes, right, right,
anything gaming now. It's just
Oh,
that we just
don't even
become
go there,
so
right?
unnaturally attached to these other things that become
Yes.
too important in our lives. And so, what we try to do specifically is to raise awareness in all faith communities that they have a role to play in the spiritual healing of our brothers and sisters, walking side by side with the 12-step programs, because that's part of our
Yes.
name. THIRST is an acronym for the Healing Initiative Recovery Spirituality 12-step. We're big 12-step proponents. So, of course, we get our spirituality there, but we want all faith communities to be able to speak about it from the altar or from their where the areas where anywhere there a preacher is preaching or a priest is speaking, that we have to start speaking to people because they're suffering out there. We got 48.5 million Americans that are suffering at this moment from substance use disorder. Notwithstanding pornography and all the
Right,
other
sure.
things that people are suffering from.
I'll,
and kids with
I'll,
the
I'll tell you,
gaming.
Keaton, that makes a
Yeah.
big difference. Glenn and I go to the same church, and
Yeah.
we were very blessed to have a pastor who talked constantly about
Yeah.
12-step programs from the
Yeah.
pulpit.
The value.
The
Yes.
value of
Success,
therapy,
yep.
the value of
100.
12-step programs, and with unapologetically saying, "Look, there's help out there. You
That's right.
and if you need more information, come see me."
And it's even amazing, even from a therapist standpoint, it says, hey, we will pay for your first 3 therapist appointments.
Wonderful.
Like the church said, we believe in therapy so much for everybody that we will
Yes.
pay.
So
I love that. And that's very unusual. Part of our work is just trying to bring people to the realization that they should be doing exactly what your pastor was doing.
Right.
I mean, what a blessing that was.
It is. So how did Thirst start? Can you kind of give me the origins of iThirst?
Yeah. Sure. So I was it's a crazy story, fellas. My profession, long before doing this, I'm an entertainer. I'm a professional entertainer. I've sung all over the world.
And voice coach.
And vocal coach. Yeah.
We'll talk
I'm a
about that at
vocal
some
coach.
point.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have played music all over the world. I've sung presidential inaugural balls. I have done, I have had an opportunity to make a living as a full-time singer, which was a blessing,
Yeah.
just an absolute blessing. That came after a little bit of a career on Wall Street and whatnot. So kind of an eclectic thing going on there. In the middle of that, as I was kind of becoming more and more involved in my career and whatnot, I had the unexpected demise of my first marriage. Totally unexpected. Took me for a loop. So I wound up being incredibly angry. I was angry at God. I was angry at anybody, hurt people, hurt people.
Yeah, right.
So true, right? So I was so mired in my own anger and resentment. It really changed who I was as a person. And so I lived like that for about 8 years, Then I had a moment of forgiveness. I dropped that rock. I dropped that resentment that I was holding on to. We know that resentment is at the core of all spiritual disease, right? Bill tells us that. And so I dropped that and started talking to people about my spiritual healing, how it healed me from everything that I was attached to, resentments, anything else. And people start saying, well, that was exciting. I'm an entertainer, so I have no problem getting up in front of people and talking about spiritual healing. And people would ask me, well, why don't you come back and talk to us about, I was the toast of every communion breakfast, and I would go to churches, all denominations, and talk to them about spiritual healing and why that was so important. And one day I was asked to speak in front of women that were suffering from heroin addiction, and they were on a spiritual retreat. And I was not certain, that was not my thing. I didn't think that they would have anything in common with me. And what happened there, fellas, really changed my mind and my heart. I went in, I told them my story. When I laughed, they laughed. When I cried, they cried. And at the end, they taught me something that was so important. And that is that we all get broken. We're all broken. We're flawed children of God. And what I saw in them, because I am a Christian, I saw in them Christ. I saw him in their suffering, but I saw me in their suffering.
Mm-hmm.
And it made me realize something very, very important, that it wasn't that our suffering was so different. Yes, of course it was. Mine came from something completely different, but it was mutually we were broken and mutually we could be transformed. I saw myself in them, and my great desire at the end was to walk with them and to be with people in their pain. And I remember driving home from there, and I had an experience. Like, I felt very euphoric. I felt, high, if you will. And I remember going, because I'm a Catholic Christian, and I went to daily mass the day after. And I said to my priest, I said, I had this experience with these women. And he said, I think you have a calling. And that was it. I started working in that. And that was the birth of it. I wound up taking over that retreat program. I wound up becoming a regular part of it, and then taking it over. Yeah, that's right. Of course. And then expanding it.
Wow.
Because I said, if we believe in that spiritual perspective, that spiritual dimension of wellness, and at its root, this is really a hole in the soul, then I said, well, what are we as faith communities doing systemically?
Right.
To help work with people. And while different churches were doing different things, people would say to me, well, we're having a fellowship meeting in the basement. I'd say, well, that's great, but unless you make sure those people know that they're welcome upstairs in the sanctuary, it's just room rental.
And that the people in the sanctuary are welcome in that room downstairs.
100%.
Right.
Like that communion with everyone. So we have to start speaking about it. We have to, so I wrote a curriculum. And that's the big thing. I wrote a curriculum that teaches faith communities.
That's great.
How to have a resource person. They're called spiritual companions in faith communities that can provide spiritual consolation and recovery resource information. And part of what they do is shepherd people to the fellowships.
Wow,
that awesome. Is amazing. So here's my experience. The church or the religion that I grew up with, quote unquote Christian, they used the Bible, but they didn't live it, right? And so. Right. So anybody with sin, right? We had special words for those people, right? Backsliders, right? Sinners, and very judgmental. God was very judgmental, and you had to, repent of all your sins, and it was very exclusive, right? So the way I described it is in those situations when I would talk to those kind of people, I would get the stiff arm, right? If I say, hey, if I start using the A word, alcoholism, oh my gosh, you can go sit in the back, or the favorite one the favorite line I heard is, hey, this church probably isn't good for you, right? Are you kidding me? Right? So now the church that we go to, Mikey and I go to the same church. So I have hope, right? I love the word hope. Hope is the kind of fuel that kept me going early on. Now I have proof, right? But hope, when I had faith that this might work, and I want to find the true north. So we started to go to this church, and I have a chance to have coffee with my pastor, one-on-one coffee. And I'm like, I'm going to give this a shot, right? Very welcoming church, the church of the prodigal son, the church of, the God, the Jesus that loved on the woman at the well, right? They're very forgiving, right? and so I'm like, I'm going to give this a chance. So I told the pastor my story, which is an amazing story to hell, right? And at the end, instead of getting a stiff arm, because I was really putting a test, instead of getting a stiff arm, he leaned into me. And he said, Glenn, look, I know you got 20 guys' phone numbers in there from AA. He goes, I want you to put my number in your phone if you ever need anything. And that was my first time where I'm like, wait a minute. This church, I actually believe, lives what they preach.
Which is
right. Yep. So then I took the next step and the next step and the next step, and now I'm 100% in. I'm so involved, doing all kinds of cool stuff, and working with guys. But man, I'll tell you what, churches need that.
Well, and I think to your point, I love what you're doing out there, because I don't think my wife didn't know how to handle an alcoholic, okay? And she lived with one for years. And yes, there's Al-Anon. She tried it. Just like AA, she had a bad experience, right? And so she got turned off from it, and she thought there was no hope for her. God had a different plan for her. She did a miracle he did a miracle in my life, and we've been married. Well, she's been married for 43 years. I've been married for 7. And it's amazing. But I love what you're doing because, again, systemically, you're trying to get involved and get the churches to all be that way. That's a big task. I mean, you probably know the number, but how many stinking churches are there in America? And you're going to Africa. So, but how many in America?
Well, I'll tell you, I think the tide is really changing, and I think that the more that we are speaking about it, and speaking about it in terms where we're not saying, listen, anytime we turn away from God, there's a modicum of sin, right? There's an element of sinfulness. So people were quick to judge, saying, oh, that's your choice, right? So people didn't understand that the brain chemistry behind any sort of addiction. So brain chemistry helps us really understand addictive behavior, helps us truly understand our powerlessness, why we are powerless over these things, right? So important. So now that we're educating people to that, we can say this. You may say that anytime we turn from God, it's a sin, but there are other mitigating factors that are psychological and emotional.
Thank you very much.
There's trauma. There's so much there. So we don't. And here's the thing. I'll tell you a story. Years ago, when I first started getting involved with this, and I was involved with a lot of people. My mentor was from Cleveland, Ohio. He set up a lot of the recovery programs out there. So I was going back and forth to Cleveland. I was going back and forth to Akron. I was talking to people out there. I was learning. I was in the midst of it, right, working with folks. And I was so excited about the work. When I came back, I was here in New Jersey, and I had an opportunity. I went to a church that was not mine, and I spoke to the pastor afterwards, and I said to him, hey, do you have something here for folks in recovery? Because this is what I was building, right? I was starting to build it, get excited about it. And he looked at me and he said, oh no, he goes, those are people of little moral strength, those are people of moral failing. He literally said that to me. It's about, right? And this was my response to him, and I wasn't disrespectful, but I was a little incredulous. I looked at him and I go, isn't that our gig anyway?
Aren't we a
Like,
hospital for the sick?
if our brothers and sisters are going down that wrong moral path, aren't I the one, as a Christian, the one that's supposed to leave the 99 and be
Right.
the hands and feet of Christ and go walking after that one? Like, I didn't say all that. I just
Sure.
said, isn't that
That's
our
the
thing anyway? And
man-made
that's in my book.
religious
Because, because I thought to myself, you're missing the gospel. Man. If that's what
Right.
you think, you are missing the gospel.
Love it.
So the community with which I work, it's a community of Catholic priests and brothers called the Missionary Servants of the Most Holy Trinity. Their founder, Father Thomas Augustine Judge, has been working in the field. Their community has been working in the field of addiction for 104 years.
Wow.
Since 1921, long before the advent of AA.
Yeah.
And they worked specifically with alcoholic priests and then clergy of all sorts.
Right.
So it's a really important thing to get our faith, all of our faith communities involved. And so we're really moving that needle. We are now in 45 different states, and we're in 13 different countries, teaching all sorts of clergy and the laity as well, how to be what we call a spiritual companion, somebody that you can go to, knock on the door of the church, and have somebody there accompany you, listen to you. It's an act of accompaniment and a ministry of presence. It's a ministry that we are doing all over the world, and raising awareness in our faith communities.
That's a tough one. It's a big task. It's a really big task, because I think that, and I love a couple things you said. Number one, you're not just preaching spirituality. I heard you loud and clear. There is this addictive. There's the science behind addiction.
Yes.
I mean, it's amazing. And I always had a hard time with the word allergy. The 12 steps, the big book talks about an allergy. And I think of an allergy as I eat a peanut and I blow up, right?
Right.
And it's a bad negative effect, outwardly showing that I'm allergic to something. And I'm like, I didn't really buy it. But somewhere along the line, I heard, what it does, it's a change. There's a change that is unique to me and my brothers in the program that happens once I take that first drink. And
that's right.
And so I love that. And I love the fact that, again, you're not spiritually. If prayer would have solved me, okay, I said so many prayers to God. My wife said so many prayers to God. My mother-in-law said so many prayers to God. If prayer would have healed me on its own, which I'm not saying that didn't have an impact. I believe I got prayed into this program, right?
Amen.
So I'm not saying that, but what I'm saying is it's a full package.
Yes.
I say this, and I say it often. I've been given a miracle. God is doing all the heavy lifting in my life. I have one job. Don't take that first step. Okay, that's right. That's the first part of my job. And then protect my sobriety, educate myself, and then help the next struggling alcoholic. And I think you said all that in the mission statement of what you're doing on the front lines of addiction. I think it's outstanding. So here's the thing. Great intro, great content. What I want to do is have you back next week. So we're gonna bug out of this episode. We're gonna come right back and let's unpack this a little bit more, because Keaton, I think you're doing so much, and I know you got more to say. So can you come back next week?
You bet. I'm happy to do that. Save me a donut.
I will.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much. All right. Thanks.
Thanks for joining us for today's coffee chat. To contact the show, email us at podcast@Sober.Coffee. If you need immediate help, the AA hotline is 800-839-1686. The National Suicide Prevention Hotline is 800-273-8255. Remember, Mike and Glenn are sharing their own journey on the path to recovery. Any suggestions, medical or otherwise, are their own experiences and should not be viewed as professional advice. See you next week, and remember, there is a solution.